My name's Bob Marion. I'm the PEO for Aviation, and I appreciate you being here. I think we have the stage for an hour to get any questions you might have, and I'm not sure if you were able to be at some of the briefings yesterday and today, but there was a lot of really good information put out by our senior leaders and my boss, Ms. Hsu, and General Lundy. So, and during General Lundy's time on this stage, I was standing back there, I think, and so he threw me under the bus a couple of times. So I hope he's here because I'm going to try to do the same return favor for him. So what I'd like to do is just say a few things, and then we'll just jump right into the questions. So first of all, I've got some folks here on the front row. So this is, if you look on the agenda for the day, it says PEO Aviation and the PMs, and so we have our PEO Aviation PMs here, but we also have some other senior leaders in our branch that are here. We've got Jim Romero. He's the PM for JAMS, Joint Attack Munitions, and that's a critical component to what we do in Army Aviation, but doesn't fall under PEO Aviation. It falls under PEO Missiles and Space, so we thank Jim for being here. We've got Colonel Jung Lee. He's the PM for Aircraft Survivability Equipment. Again, that's another one of those PMs that falls under a separate PEO. That's PEO IEWS, so we appreciate Jung being here. Got Dan Bailey from the AWRs, who's doing our JMR and FVL work. Got Steve Bradham, the commander of AATD. So we have a wide variety of our senior leaders that do the business of our acquisition from the S&T perspectives all the way up through design, development, EMD, technology maturation and risk reduction, all the way through production and fielding. And I think Kathy Dickens or General Richardson's going to be up here after me to talk about the sustainment piece. So I think we have all the people to answer whatever your questions might be from all across our aviation enterprise. So please don't hold back. And one other thing I will say, and I did allude to it in the remarks I made, is this has been a really, really good Quad A for me. I mean, I've seen probably the best participation in this one than I've seen in the last several years, and we've had great attendance from the Headquarters Department of the Army. You saw Frank Muth, General Muth, speak this morning. He's in the back now. We've seen folks from ASALT, including Ms. Hsu, my boss, and folks all the way through down to the director of the Aviation and IEWS, Mr. Brian Craddock. He's here. We've had great support from the G8. We've had folks from FDV here. I've seen G4 here. And even, so we have the strategic level discussions and folks in the meetings that help us get a perspective from the building. And then the second piece of that is great participation from across the functional support inside the branch. So I've seen folks from the AMRDEC here. Dan Bailey's one of those. Dr. Bill Lewis from the Aviation Engineering Dectorate, Mr. Jeff Langout, and I've seen plenty of his folks here. I've seen folks here from SAMD that do our foreign military sales. I've seen people from AMCOM, obviously, the AMCOM Logistics Center. I mean, we've had Army Contracting Command, so we've had great participation from across all of our functionals and across all of the enterprise. So I know, again, Ms. Hsu has shared some comments to me about she thought the level of engagement at this one has been, at this Quad A has been great, and I share those sentiments. So along those lines, I think the PMs are going to come up, and we're just going to just open it up straight for questions, and so we'll just go straight to the questions, and I'll just ask you guys if they ask a question that's in your lane, just introduce yourself so we don't have to go down the row. I think most of the folks here know who all the PMs are. So questions? Go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Pat Host with Defense Daily. The Common Cockpit, I'm wondering what exactly would the Common Cockpit be? What are the common items that the Army wants in the Common Cockpit? And I know that the Army has been talking about a Common Cockpit for probably more than 10 years. I'm wondering what's taken so long for the Army to get to it, and when you think you might eventually get to it.
Okay, thanks. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll let Dan talk about the mission systems demo and FVL. So from a common standpoint, so we've been talking about so I started working on cockpits in Comanche years ago, about 10 years ago now, and So we've talked about standard interfaces. We've talked about from a hardware and a software standpoint. So that, and you've heard people talk about reconfigurable configuration items. So you could, people say plug and play. They use all those types of terms. But and in smaller fleets, you've actually seen where they use the actual identical components, and they use things like pin setups to identify software loads, so that when you put an identical CDU or MFD from one airplane into the next airplane, it actually reads the software load from the pin setup so that it knows what aircraft it's in, and so that's an idea of a hardware interface that we could standardize to get to common components. So another idea is standard interfaces for software, so that we can take maximum advantage of multiple contracting, multiple contractors' capabilities to deliver something that if you weren't the original design and development and producer of a cockpit, we can still leverage your capability on a platform in the future. So defining the interfaces and defining the standards is key for us. Now, if everything started at the same time, that would be nirvana, right? But it never works that way. So we started buying Chinooks in the 1960s. We started buying Blackhawks in the 1970s and Apaches in the 1980s. So we got to digitization in each of those platforms at different points in time. And so I look at the plan moving forward, and our last group of non-digitized airplanes in this enterprise is UH-60V. So that's our opportunity to try to build in standard interfaces so that we can move forward with a cockpit design that we could leverage off multiple competitors in the future. So I guess that's the broad way I'd like to talk about cockpit commonality. And then our opportunity moving forward, I said it'd be great if we all started at the same time. So we have the opportunity to do that in our combination of JMR and FVL. And so Dan, if you wouldn't mind talking about how you guys plan to do that.
Okay, so sir, I would say you got it just right. It's less important about the components and what the design of the cockpit has in it versus the architecture and the backbone that you put in place that allows it to change over time. And so regardless of when the FVL number 1 comes out and when the FVL 2 comes out, we want to make sure that the backbone not only allows the evolution of those vehicles over time, but the evolution of the subcomponents. So we know the subcomponents are going to change, and as we know from our iPhone or other things, they change more rapidly in the future. That's going to expand. So what we're doing under the mission system architecture demo of the JMR TD is we're demonstrating that knowledge base. Again, it's less about the components and the functions, if you will, and more about that backbone. So we've started that process. The initial 60 Victor, and I would say it's just an ongoing process. What's taken us so long? Same thing that's taken our iPhones to get to the point where they are today, okay? Because over time you learn, and that's the process we're going through. We're learning and we're understanding. The 64 Echo, latest instantiation of an open system architecture. 60 Victor, next substantiation of that. First FVL, next substantiation. And there's another aspect to that, and that's the acquisition process. So as part of the JMR TD, we're looking at the acquisition strategies that go along with that. Maybe there's not a characteristic of an open architecture that lasts forever. Maybe one of the requirements is to put a new architecture in every couple of years. That's one of the things that we have to think about. So we're looking at all those strategies under the JMR TD effort. We're looking at the standards, the processes, and the knowledge that we have to gain over time. Okay.
Thanks. Other questions? Go ahead.
Ellen Mitchell, Inside the Army. My question is, what is the Army's vision for the ARM Scout version of the future vertical lift?
Yeah, so I think someone asked me that question earlier today about Armed Aerial Scout, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. When I stand up and made my remarks, I made a comment about how we probably don't give the enterprise enough credit for all of the work that's been done in manned-unmanned teaming that's allowed us to get to the point where we still have a valid requirement for an armed aerial scout. There's no question about that. It's just it's a physical reality that we can't afford to buy that platform today. So we're accomplishing that mission through all of about a decade's worth of work that was done between aircraft project offices, the TICM. Back then it was TISM Comanche when I was working there as a major, and there were a bunch of people doing what we called MUM 1, MUM 2, MUM 3, and then the MUM 4 experiment, which was, could you even control a UAS from the cockpit of a Comanche? That was the question. So we did a series of experiments in the 2002 to 2004 timeframe to help inform whether or not that was even possible from a pilot workload and from just a capability standpoint. Could we do that? And so fast forward now a decade, and we're actually going to accomplish that mission in the near term with a UAS and a version 2 Shadow and a Gray Eagle and an Apache. So we probably don't give the enterprise enough credit for the work that we've done that's enabled us to do that. That helps us also fund some of the other main things that we're doing in ARI. So first I want to say that there's been a lot of great work that's been done to do that. So for FVL, so we're going to, and by the way, so we also need to maintain enough agility in our process. So if somebody came to the table tomorrow with an armed aerial scout that met every requirement that we have, that we would be able to review that and see, does that now fit in the priorities that we have and that we can fund? So whether that happens or not, we just need to be postured for the ability to do that. Now, whether or not it'll shake out in the priorities, I just don't know the answer to that question. So for FVL now, so that's kind of a three-pronged thing, right? So FVL, our initial look is for utility and utility and attack variants, and that's about 2135 Blackhawks and 690 Apaches. And we're not saying it's a one-for-one, but there's going to be some subset of that total number of aircraft that go to those missions, and then we'll look at so that's about 3,000 airplanes or some subset of that. So that's going to take us a long time to get to fiscally. After that, then we would look at the other missions that our platforms have to perform that are in that family of vehicles that falls in FVL. So heavy, ultra heavy, and scout on the lower end, we'd have to look at where we are in there based on what's capable and what the requirements and what the priorities are. And then we would move into whatever, if it's an armed scout variant, that's next, or an armed or a heavy variant. So that's kind of how it'll play out. We'll focus initially on utility and attack, and then we'll get to the other missions, of which Scout would be one of those.
Well, I asked because General Lundy said earlier this month that the Army was doing a lot of AOAs, looking at the armor reconnaissance variant. And so I guess, could you talk a little bit more about the AOAs the Army was doing?
The analysis of alternatives. We're doing a BCA right now on FVL, and that'll inform how we go after an analysis of alternatives once we do an material development decision and move forward into the FVL program. So the BCAs will inform how we move forward in the AOAs, and the AOAs will document how we move forward and what the current capabilities are and where we see those capabilities maturing over time. So when we do actually go after the different variants, what would we be likely to see at that point in time? I don't know. Dan, do you have anything to add on that? Good. Sorry. When is the BCA finished? Do you have...
Late this year, documented first next year.
Yeah, so all the analysis will be finished late this year. We'll present the review of the BCAs would be next year in time for an MDD in FY17, which is in October of 16. So.
Hi, Michael Hoffman with military.com. I had a question in terms of funding FVL going forward. The Navy is working on a program for their next class of nuclear submarine, and they're facing a similar funding problem. So they worked with Congress to set aside a separate fund from their shipbuilding fund to do that. I was wondering if the Army had thought about doing a similar thing of working with Congress to kind of separate the funding for future vertical lift going forward, a major program like that with Congress so it's not more of a either or kind of question when it comes to the budget.
So So I'm not the funding guy, the G8 person. I'm not sure if Wally's here in the room or not. But what I will say is, FVL has competed along with all the other major platforms, Apache, Blackhawk, Chinook, all of our enablers, all of the survivability equipment, munitions. It's competed with all of those. And right now we see that we're funded along the timeline that supports, the BCAs and the AOAs and the MDD and the milestone A that I talked about earlier today. So I'm not aware of any path that the Army leadership has to separately fence funds for FVL. I think right now the answer is it's competing and competing well. And then, you heard a lot of briefings over the last 2 days about potential BCA levels of funding. And if that happens, I don't know what the Navy's plan is for their programs, but I can tell you for us, if a BCA level of funding happens and there's no adjustments to the authorities that are current for how we're allowed to spend OCO dollars, then we'll have challenges across all the portfolio on continuing to modernize.
Good afternoon. Gretchen Brainerd from Apple. I'll take all the iPhone questions from the audience. I get a lot of questions from the individual commands about AWRs not being consistent across airframes and not having approval for currently shipping products. What's the best way that we can engage to help with the AWR process and get them consistent?
I didn't, you said not consistent across something product.
Airframes. So currently we have some airframes that are approved for iPad 2, which you can no longer get. And so people are approaching us for quotes for products that we can no longer get them. So just how can we help with that?
That's a good question. So yeah, I see Jeff Langout raising his hand. So Jeff's the executive director of the Aviation Engineering Directorate. So all of the AWRs go through his organizations. But they come to the PMs, right? So
Yeah.
the PMs are responsible for working with AED and working with the user in Fort Rucker to make sure that we understand exactly what we want and what's the effectivity of that AWR. Does it go across the platforms? Is it only one unit? If it's only one unit going for a very specific purpose, then that's very different than trying to do an AWR that might entail the entire fleet of whatever the platform might be,
Right.
which is very different from an AWR for all of the platforms.
Right.
So what I'd say is the single point of contact that you probably should talk to is my chief engineer on my staff, and I can talk to you about who that is
Right.
after this. And then that, based on what the requirement is from whatever the user community might be, then we'll make sure we point you in the right direction from a platform perspective or an AED perspective or wherever that might be.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bob?
Hey, sir.
John Riggs, National Lead Inquirer. Subject is DVE, Degraded Visual Environment. While we're waiting on whatever we're waiting on to solve the DVE problem, and we've been waiting since I was in the 4th grade, is there some idea or some initiatives that are ongoing with you and your PMs that's really helping to address the DVE problem? And if you could you briefly tell us what they are?
Yes, sir. So there's a lot of initiatives ongoing right now in DVE. I know Steve Bradham's folks are doing a lot of things. The folks at TAPO are doing a lot of things. Jerry and his team are doing a lot of things. So I'll kind of give you a summary on where we are, and then I'll ask Jerry to talk about a few things. The first is the BORS AOA. So I understand, I was there when General Lundy yesterday said that's not the final solution, but what that BORS AOA outbrief to, so we're going to give, we owe Ms. Hsu an outbrief from the BORS AOA, and that's going to document what the analysis showed on how we need to move forward to solve the DVE problem, not just in a brownout, but in, as General Lundy talked about, and as you've heard other people talk about, it's an actions at the X issue, and it's also an in-flight, how do we take best advantage of whatever the degraded visual condition might be, whether it's snow or rain or whatever, night, whatever it might be. So how do we take it and turn that to an advantage, right? So it's more than just landing to an X. So that outbrief to Ms. Hsu will happen, I think, probably within the next 3 weeks, if I remember correctly. We're on our calendar to do that. And from there, we'll get guidance and direction on how we move forward with the additional dollars that have been allocated to Jerry's team to execute this year for a DVE solution. So Jerry, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yes, sir. We're working a couple of things, and we're working across the enterprise to ensure that we have a coordinated effort. We are tied in very closely with Colonel Paul Howard and what his crew is doing with the DVEPS program, to include we're supporting source selection with him. So we're tracking very closely with what they're doing. We're also working with Todd Dellard and his crew, and we have some efforts ongoing with him to get us some system characterization definition so that we can go into an RFP that will be released out for the BORS program, we believe. We're working with each of the platforms to ensure that flight controls are where they need to be so that when we integrate them, they are a part of the final solution with that. Lieutenant Colonel Spence Guida in the back, we're working with his team because of a symbology to ensure that we have the right face to what the aviator is looking at so that he understands it and he can receive that data appropriately and act accordingly with that. As General Marion talked about, we will see Ms. Hsu the end of April. The AOA will be briefed out with that, and we fully plan to present a program there with the support of General Lundy and Colonel Mark Mosier out of Fort Rucker, as well as having all of the appropriate personnel there to ensure to Ms. Hsu that we do have a coordinated effort going forward with that. We do have some dollars in 15 and a little bit in 14 that we will present a plan to Ms. Hsu on what we plan to do with those dollars as well. Part of what we would like to do with that is Todd Dellard and AATD are working a fused capability to show the TRL level of fusion for me so that it would be a multi-sensor capability. We're going to do some testing on that in Yuma. I fully am prepared to next spring bring line instructor pilots into that aircraft to do an early user assessment to get early feedback from the field so that we can better inform how we go forward with DVE.
Other questions?
Sir, Andy Mann with a 159 cab out of Fort Campbell, and I just got back from deployment in August. I was flying Medevac. Is the Army looking at changing the HH's med interior? Basically, when we got there, we pulled it out just for weight, and basically, I'd much rather either have a Lima or a stripped out mic.
Great question, and we appreciate your feedback. We have, in Utility Helicopter Project Office over the last 3 years, we stood up what we consider to be, I guess, the first product directorate for Medevac specifically to address your concerns. Certainly we've been taking that feedback via the TICM for quite some time now, that essentially what we've got is we've got a system that's a little bit too robust and then definitely too heavy. And we needed to take a hard look at that. So what we did with that organization is started engaging AMED and the medical proponency at Fort Rucker about, could you please look at what else you'd like to do, right? What do you want to replace it with, right? As opposed to only having the option of take it all or take it out. So we tackled it on a couple different fronts. First, the Black Hawk right now, as you know, whether it be HH or UH, is underpowered based off of the growth in weight that we've put on it over the last 12 years when it comes to survivability equipment. So we've got to get back at, you need more power to lift whatever we give you. Secondly, with the paramedic capability for the back of the aircraft, there was an additional capability required now in that aircraft, right? We were going to do a different level of care, right, en route. So we asked, and MEPD led, and they're concluding what is essentially a capabilities-based assessment to take a look at what new equipment they need, as well as where we can potentially use some other things that we've done for other customers, right, FMS customers, to give you a little bit more tailorable litter package for the back, if you will, a lighter package, right? So it's not a pull all or none. It's not a transport 6 or put them on the floor, for example. So we have, and Medevac and MEPD will conclude that study here shortly, and we expect to move out on a plan rather quickly over the next fiscal year to solicit a change to essentially what is the Mike model program as it comes out of production, and then retrofit the rest of the fleet with a more modular, lighter system that actually gets at what you're talking about, which is performance in hot conditions, as well as gets at the paramedic capability in the back of that aircraft. So we want to provide the right level of care with the right equipment and allow the aircraft to perform where it can't perform today. Lastly, with the ITEP program, as that comes on board and we take advantage of what that airframe currently could handle, right, which is more power, that'll be the last step. That'll be a little bit longer term, but I just want you to know that we have heard you. We are trying to not take it and do whatever's a Band-Aid. We're trying to do it right for you. And I would fully expect us, we're on the cusp of being able to come out and do some sort of limited user evaluation of essentially what we believe will meet the requirements for the future and get you a lighter, more tailorable system in the back. And I would look for that over the next fiscal year. Thanks for the question.
Sir, Brian Benson with ViaSat. Can you talk a little bit about the Army's plan in the future and networking your battle space with Link 16?
So I'll talk a little bit, then I'll let Jeff talk about it. So right now, from a requirement standpoint, we have a Link 16 requirement in our Apache fleet. It's in what they're calling version 4, and they've got the authorization to field 2 lots of aircraft with a solution on that will allow them to employ Link 16. So we're looking at how we're going to attack that moving forward after those first 2 lots. And I don't know, Jeff, if you want to pick it up from there.
Yes, sir. And to pick up on that, we did test the Link 16 capability in our version 4 software capability set last August at Eglin Air Force Base. It proved out to be very beneficial. The user really is looking forward to that capability, and like General Marion said, this coming January we'll start producing that capability in our first aircraft that will roll off the line in January 16 that I was getting at. So yes, the working with the trade-out capability manager, they look at continuing that capability to give them the situational awareness, which it really grants quite a bit in the cockpit as we go forward in the 864 from both the Naval and the Air Force assets that we garnered from that radio itself. So I foresee the Army, specifically, I know General Lundy himself, working through the trade-out capability manager, are highly interested in keeping that in all the airframes as we go forward.
So I have a question for the lady from Apple. Why is the 6 Plus so big? Is she still here?
Because the public demanded it, honestly, for years, I've been getting beat up that the regular iPhone wasn't big enough for certain people, and just the general demand forced us to do it. So you still have the option. You could do 6 or 6 Plus, so.
So what about the Mini, though? The iPad
about
Mini,
it?
isn't that close enough?
No, well, that doesn't come with a phone out of the box. So now you have different options, and it's one less thing you have to turn off on the Mini, especially in the cockpit, so it's a lot better.
So can't you do a standard interface with you? I'm just kidding.
I'll let Tim know on our next call.
Hey, he's an Auburn grad, right? Any Android users want to comment? Okay. Well, listen. I appreciate again. This to me has been probably the best Quad A I've been to in probably 5 years. And it's because of the interaction from industry. It's because the Army has been able, through proffers from Quad A and through support from our headquarters, to get the right people in the meetings and engagements with industry and with our soldiers that you've seen walking around here. Getting comments like that are great for us. I mean, it really goes a long way in helping us understand, and hopefully we've been able to talk to you about what we're doing to help alleviate your problems. Because, you know, when you talk about those issues, they get to the user community and back to the material developers in order for us to be able to deliver a capability that works for you. And if it doesn't, Lieutenant Colonel Bryce Anderson is right there. You can blame him because he's responsible. No, but seriously though, so thank you for being here. Thank you for engaging. This is what we need to do to make the enterprise work and to make our branch better in support of the Army. So I think Major General Richardson, the CG for AMCOM, and/or Ms. Kathy Dickens, his Deputy CG, are going to be here next to talk about sustainment planning in AMCOM. So thank you very much.